Hey, everybody. A few days ago, I ran a piece on Fanboy Planet about an upcoming horror film going into production based on Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, who is a public domain character now and probably has been for over a year. But there are a few of us that are huge Oswald the Lucky Rabbit fans. So I had to follow up with the writer director Lilton Stewart III and find out a little more about what his plans were. And here is the conversation.
What drew or draws you to Oswald?
So what draws me to Oswald is when I used to play Epic Mickey a lot when I had my
Okay.
Wii, and I really liked that story. So it was this situation where when the Winnie the Pooh Blood and Honey film came out, and I went and experienced that, I was kind of like duped at the very beginning of it, and I was like, wait, I thought they were getting ready to go into this new territory, utilizing these characters, and then when they didn't go there, as a filmmaker, I was like, I want to do that. Is there anything out there? And my friend basically said, well, check public domain. There's tons of characters out in that space. And I found that Oswald just recently, that previous month, because it had came out in February, that
Mhm.
previous month had just went into public domain. And I was simply like, wait, Oswald's in public domain and nobody's doing anything with this character. So that was the initial draw. But I actually genuinely love the fact that Oswald's whole story, even in the real world setting with
Mhm.
Walt and Disney, that he is the original. He's the OG. He was first. He was the one that should have been, that was outcast, that was now forgotten, and somebody else took his shining and got and reaped all the benefits and rewards. And I kind of like that idea of that character coming back into a space where he has a lot of resentment. He's a flawed character overall. He's hurt, but he's also smiling through everything, and he's trying his best to, just kind of like accept these flaws and everything. And I just really like that, and it immediately clicked that that's what I should be telling. Because everything else I was looking at, it was a lot of really random, odd things that hadn't been done 100 times over already. And I was trying to stay away from all of the Draculas, all the Frankensteins, all of the werewolves, and all of those things.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, I remember this guy. I used to play Epic Mickey. That game was great. And then I just kind of spiraled down a rabbit
Yeah,
hole.
you can't avoid the pun. Go
I
ahead.
can't avoid it. I can't avoid it. To get to the point where I started realizing all of these backstories, because I didn't know the history until I looked it up on public domain and started doing my research.
Mhm.
And that's literally the original thing that brought me into the Oswald character.
And we should say, in case anybody from Disney is watching, we do understand
Yeah.
that Oswald and Mickey have made peace. I think that was the plot of
Yes.
Epic Mickey too, and and we believe his gas station is still open in Disney California Adventure. It was the last time I was there, so
It is. Yes, I was when I was there just this past year. It was there.
I think you've kind of delved into this, but uh, what about I think it's Walt Disney. I've always used Oswald's story as kind of, I used to teach high school and I'd say it's a story about not giving up. What about
Mhm.
Walt's early days really inspires you?
Well, it's kind of this thing where just the overall idea of being able to create something for youth overall, right? There's this thing that kind of like attracts the youth in everybody, not just youth in terms of children, but the child inside of all of us, the kid that doesn't want to grow up, the Toys R Us kid, so to speak, before there was a Toys R Us, is kind of telling. And the fact that Walt used these stories, despite some of the flaws that was in the stories for the time periods that they came out, they were very challenging stories. They had a lot of pain and trauma in them that you wouldn't necessarily think of when you're a child watching it, and you don't realize until later on when you grow up and you go and revisit these old films like Bambi, Pinocchio and Dumbo and things of that nature, where you're like, wow, there was a lot of depth in what it's like to be a child, or to be brought into the world, or to experience life in a very weird and obscure way, and sometimes a hurtful way, and sometimes a loving way. And just the way they handled their stories in the beginning, I've always just really loved, especially the fact that some of them were very scary. I remember watching Snow White, and when the witch pulled up for the first time with the apple, I was like seeing her eyes being like all bulged out and everything. I was scared as a kid, and it was just a very visceral reaction that you don't realize stays with you as you move forward and everything. So it's always been just the way they told stories that has always kind of kept me there the entire time.
And historical note, supposedly they had to reupholster the seats at the New York theater where they first showed it, because exactly that, the witch would cause small children to wet themselves. So
I didn't know that.
That is the apocryphal story. I don't know if it's actually historically true, but I have read that in a couple of sources.
I believe it.
The thing with the public domain, though, is people have done all kinds of riffs, and I'm sure, like when Epic Mickey came out, well, still, I have an Oswald inflatable lawn decoration that I put up for Christmas, and most people still don't really know who he is. So why not just create your own character, like a parody or a pastiche character?
Well, for the same reason that I think, like, public domain as a whole, and how it has been very fruitful for a lot of stories, still exists to this day. There's something to be said about being able to tell different versions of these stories. Like, how many different times have we seen, Alice in Wonderland, and different variations of how that story's been told? There's this thing that I kind of like to think about, in like, there's nothing new under the sun. It's always been kind of said to us, but there's a take where, like, what do you bring to that story? And for Oswald Down the Rabbit Hole, it genuinely started off as like, us just using the trolley trouble situation. But then we dived into a lot of like legal things. There was a lot of like lawyer talk, and we got various opinions, which originally kept bringing me back to the screenplay and the story as a whole, and retuning it, refining it, because the one thing I didn't want to do was impinge on any copyrights. I didn't want to be in a situation where we would be in trouble, or where Disney would come after us or what have you. And it ended up technically turning into an original character, unsequentially to the overall story arc, where instead of the rabbit essentially being called or being Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, I kind of did this take where it's the Frankenstein effect, where I switched the Oswald cartoon character to be a man who had the same type of woes, who was forgotten, who was outcast, and is trying to find his way back. And this cartoon character that he created, that's simply just called the Rabbit, is the embodiment of him as the character. So for legal reasons, yes, it was a loophole so that we could tell the story, but technically the actual Rabbit is an original character by default, just told through the lens of the Trolley Troubles cartoon. So the Trolley Troubles cartoon is kind of like the first version that this guy Oswald created, and then the Rabbit that we see in the film is like the newer version of that character, because we ended up switching a lot of things with them.
Yeah, and it's interesting you choose that short. I guess partially because that's free and clear public domain, no question. But that is also specifically the one Disney has used, like with Steamboat Willie, the image of Mickey at the steering wheel, that Oswald in that trolley is what they license out like crazy. So every Christmas ornament that Hallmark has done has been in Trolley Trouble. I have 2 different versions of it. And so, what is it? Is it because that's just, there's no question that one's public domain, or what draws you to it?
So that one was the one that I seen that was as clear as humanly possible. It was like, there was no, I didn't want the movie to be disrupted in any way, where it would be like, oh, well, if we're going this route with it, that there would be any guessing to whether or not there would even be a legal court case battle, if there was something to where they questioned it or whatnot, to where it was like I would be in a space where I wasn't 100% confident that we could tell a story with it. And using the Trolley Troubles cartoon as more so as a MacGuffin or kind of like an Ark of a Covenant type thing, then there's literally there's literally no question of what's happening with it. So it being used is kind of like the genie in the bottle effect.
Of all the comparisons that I could have predicted being made today, Oswald or the trolley to the Ark of the Covenant, not on my scorecard. So you've already shot a trailer for this, but you're actually not starting production for a couple of months. So why that approach? And I say that not having seen the trailer at all yet.
Absolutely. So the reason why we did that was literally for the investment purposes of getting investors and studios on board with the project. We wanted to show what we were going to do with the film, with the story. We have the entire team that is basically signed up to do this film, all collaborating on this announcement trailer. So we have our animation studio, which is Mana Animation Studio. They're the ones that put together all of the cartoon elements that's in the trailer. There's a company called A Good Cause Video Production, which is the team that's going to handle everything with the gaffers, our DP, our camera operators, and sound or what have you. Our editor is somebody from St. Louis that I know who does a lot of commercials and a lot of music videos, things of that nature, who has a very high-end company. And then we also have a real important visual effects supervisor who's done tons of Marvel films that's handling all of the visual effects in the trailer. So it's a very, very high-end announcement trailer so that we can showcase what we're trying to put together to let everybody know that this isn't a cash grab. This isn't something that we're just like, oh, this is cool. Let's just go out and make a movie with all of our friends. We're trying to really establish a story here on the visual front and on the literary front that showcases everything. So that announcement trailer essentially was for investors, but also for the people to kind of give them poise that this story, this character is in good hands with somebody that respects the lore and the history and everything.
Cool. I can not wait to see this. So you've been doing indie horror, I saw shorts listed. I still haven't watched them. I haven't found them, I should say. Who are your influences as a filmmaker and for horror in particular?
Ooh, that is a long list. I was debating on who I was going to say because I get asked that a lot, and I'm always remembering that I'm forgetting people. But just off the top, there's there's Wes Craven, of course. There's Mike Flanagan. There's Sam Raimi. There's Jennifer Kent. There's Rose Glass. She's a new filmmaker that I've gotten really, really excited about. James Wan. There's also Guillermo del Toro. There's Ari Aster, Jordan Peele, Robert Eggers. I have a long list. And that's just kind of more current than anything. But yeah, all the OGs, your Alfred Hitchcocks, your David Cronenbergs, all of them are also in there. I just recently, these are the ones that are inspiring me in my modern state.
Yeah. Okay. So, I like to end with this kind of question is, you don't have to say they're your absolute favorite films because that's not fair. As clearly ask about your influences. You're like, am I leaving anybody out? But what, other than your own films, what would be a couple that you think that someone might not have found that they really need to see just because you love them?
So recency bias, When Evil Lurks, has really, really done a number on me. It has done a number on me to the point to where I can't forget this film. This film is embedded in my head for the past few months. And I cautionarily tell people to watch it, but I also just want people to see it because the way their storytelling in that film is really intense. I also The Holdovers, on a more lighter note, is a movie that I don't know if it's going to end up getting a whole lot of recognition. I hope it does. It's a smaller film with Paul Giamatti, and I thought it was a really great story. a movie that's probably picking up more steam now, but at the time I was just like, this is the best thing ever. It's my number one film of the year. Godzilla -1 is
100%.
amazing.
Are you going to go see it in black and white?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm going to go see that.
Me
and then
too.
also, my film, The Burden of Guilt, even though it's not out yet, it's on Letterboxd. So if anybody is on Letterboxd, add it to your watch list, and when it becomes available, watch that one. That one, I think, is one of the best one-room dramas of all time. Not even about myself, just in general. I think that's a great film.
Okay, I'll be checking it out. Well, thank you, Lilton, for joining me tonight, and great conversation. And I so look forward to seeing what you're going to do with this. So thank you.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate the time.